All right, let's talk about the bipart track system, which is very similar to the single door track system. The bipart track system still just has one motor on it, as you can see here, and the belt runs down and goes around the idle pulley on the far end. So on a bipart track system, it doesn't really matter which side you put the motor on. Maybe one side has more easier access if you ever want to access it in the future, but in terms of operation, it doesn't matter which side the motor's on. So one difference about a bipart track system is that you've got a different arrangement of belts. So you've got two panels, obviously, two wood panels shown here as an example with wood clamps on each one. And on the wood clamps that are next to the motor, notice how the belt lock tabs are on the right hand side in this image. Okay, so the motor's on the right, the belt lock tabs are on the right. So the belt attaches to this bracket on the top of the door. On the left hand side of the door, the belt attaches here. All right, then the belt runs around the motor, then the belt goes down all the way to the next panel, as you can see here, and these door clamps are attached in reverse. So these belt clamps are on the back side of the door. So if you remember, the belt clamps on the one next to the motor, they're on the other side. The belt clamps here are on the rear side, so they're sort of mirror image. So the belt clamps are attached on this side. So the belt, here's the belt clamp, belt lock tab. So this connects here and it gets cut here, and then this one attaches here, goes around the pulley block, goes around from this belt clamp, goes around here, and does the same thing, sits inside the channel for the belt here. All right, so on the right hand side, meaning the motor's on the right in this view, the belt attaches on this panel on the front. Okay, the belt goes around the back, belt goes all the way down to this panel, and on this panel these clamps are on in reverse, and so the belt attaches on the back side here, and then on the front, as you can see, the belt sits inside the channel. Again, like we mentioned on the single door, there's a tab that's not drawn. This little white tab that's a quick release for the rollers to pop off of the pin on the clamp. Those tabs would be facing each other, so you'd have one tab here and one tab here. The tabs won't really install well if you have them on this side because they'll want to bang into this belt attachment bracket. Okay, make sure your tabs are facing each other so that they can fit nicely onto the door clamp. Most bipart track systems are going to be longer than the track length we can ship with FedEx, which is 96 inches maximum. So what often happens is we'll take the track and join it together in the center with what I call a track joiner bracket. So in the center there'll be a bracket that's about 8 inches long, and it has about 20 or so button heads on it, and you join the track together in the center. On some track systems, it requires multiple tracks, 3, 4, etc. Those track joiner brackets might be spread out. The location for the track joiner bracket will be marked on the top of your track. So when you get your track, it'll be marked here, join. If there's multiple join points, it'll have you some indicators, join A to A, another one would say join B to B. In some cases, the track is cut at a 15-degree angle in case the rollers are going to roll over a junction. We always use that angle, but if the track is meeting dead center in the middle where the rollers won't go over it, that's always a square cut. One thing to keep in mind is when you install a bipart set of doors, you want the doors to touch each other in the middle perfectly flush. So if you close the doors together and you've got, let's say you got a gap at the top, the doors are touching at the bottom and there's a gap at the top, then what you would do is you would adjust the nuts on the threaded rod towards the outside edge to raise the outside of this door up, raise the outside of this one up so that closes the gap. Same thing if the door is touching at the top and you've got a gap at the bottom. That means your track's not straight. It means that you need to lower the outside parts here by adjusting the threaded rods on the top, and that will true up your leading edges of the door to touch together nicely. Now keep in mind, you also want to true up the doors when they're in the pocket so that the leading edge is flush with your millwork or trim or your split jamb, whatever you're trying to line up the door with. Adjust the threaded rods here to make that line up perfectly. As I mentioned on the single door track system, you've got a home switch here. That home switch is adjustable, and the home switch will determine the fully open position. So you would adjust this back and forth to determine where you want the doors to be open to. Now, when you have your doors meet together in the middle, all right, when the doors are fully closed together, if there's some locations where the center of the door needs to meet together perfectly, and you find that when the doors are closed together, the center point is to one side, maybe towards this side, what you can do is you can go loosen up this bolt on this belt tensioner, tighten up the bolt on this side over here, on the right hand side at the motor, and that will shift your center point over. So you loosen up one side by, let's say, 1 or 2 turns, tighten up the right hand side by a couple of turns, because when you put the system together, the center point won't necessarily be precise until you start doing some fine tuning. But again, as we mentioned on the first video, don't bottom out this bolt. This pulley block moves outward. You don't want to over tighten this so that this pulley block has nowhere to go, because then you have no more adjustment. If you find that you've pushed this all the way out and you need some more adjustment, what you may need to do is loosen it back up and readjust the belt on your belt clamps. Okay, so your belt is fitted here. You could adjust the belt by 1 notch either direction if you need to make some adjustments. All right. Okay, one thing to add is that if you have a glass clamp, the glass clamps wrap around the top of the piece of glass. The belt attachments are almost identical. They look the same. They have the same belt lock tab on it. So those principles apply for glass as well as wood door clamps. Another thing to keep in mind is, just like on the single door track system, when you first turn on the power, it's a good idea to have the doors pushed out away from the motor, away from the switch a little bit, let's say halfway open, and then for your first time turning on the power, the system should boot up, do a couple little small diagnostic moves, and then it should start moving very slowly towards the home switch. So if you put the belt on backwards from the way it's drawn here, what will happen is when you first turn on the power, the doors will start moving towards each other and bang together. And with glass, you certainly don't want that to happen. On your first test, especially with glass doors, make sure your glass cannot touch at top and bottom. You should have bumpers on the top and bottom always on glass. They make clear bumpers for glass. Make sure that the glass can never touch. So when you turn on the power, the door should be moving towards the motor direction. Okay, when it hits the switch, comes back off the switch, and it parks, that defines your fully open position. And then in the brain of the system, we determine how far the door travels to the center point. All right, hope that helps.